Greetings, Culture Warriors. It is I, Jeff Vieira, the author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. We've had no shortage of podcasts recently where we're talking about different iconic brands going out of business. This one's no different. This is from People Magazine by Maria Pasquini. Ruby Tuesday is closing some locations without giving workers advance notice. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Like many restaurant chains, Ruby Tuesday has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic, but according to a new report by Business Insider, a number of locations are being closed without giving staff members any advanced warning. A number of employees told the outlet that they only found out their restaurant had closed after showing up for work, which was described in the report as a common practice for the chain. If a store is shutting down permanently, Ruby Tuesday never, ever gives notice to anyone, a current employee in Missouri who's been with the company for 14 years told Business Insider. The district manager will call the general manager literally the night before and say, "Hey, you're being shut down. Tonight is your last day of being open. Don't tell anyone till tomorrow." My friend worked at one of the ones that closed down during the pandemic, and he walked in to get his check, and there was a sign on the door that said the restaurant is now closed, a server from Philadelphia also told the outlet. They used to sometimes transfer you to a new location, but they don't do that anymore because other locations are struggling. They put a sign on the door and you come to work and you realize you have no job. Although the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act requires employees with over 100 full-time workers to give employees notification of closures or layoffs at least 60 days in advance, as the outlet noted, this rule does not apply to smaller operations. Additionally, the majority of Ruby Tuesday employees only work part-time. Neither Ruby Tuesday nor NRD Capital, which acquired the chain in 2017, immediately responded to people's requests for comment. Earlier this week, a local Florida news outlet reported on a sudden Ruby Tuesday location closure at the Port Charlotte Town Center Mall. "We found out when we got here," a cook told the Port Charlotte Sun, which also published a photo of a sign employees found on the door, which read, "This Ruby Tuesday location is closed. We are sorry for any inconvenience that this may have caused you." According to the outlet, another nearby location had also taken employees by surprise with a sudden closure 2 months earlier. Back in 2019, WROC reported on a similar closure in Greece, New York, where employees learned of the permanent closure via email. Like a number of chain restaurants, Ruby Tuesday has closed many of its locations in the United States in recent months. Earlier this month, the Business Insider reported that they had permanently closed 169 restaurants since January, leaving less than 300 locations open. In an interview published in May, Aziz Hashim, founder and managing partner of NRD Capital, acknowledged that the pandemic had accelerated the rate of store closures. "What might have taken several more years happened much more quickly," he told Restaurant Business. "We were forced to make decisions overnight. We're doing maybe 5 years worth of closings in 5 months, he added, noting that out of the 470 restaurants that were open at the start of the year, only between 270 and 300 were still open. All right, so there's a tendency in these situations to attempt to blame the pandemic, but there are a couple of points that argue against this in this case. Number one is, as noted by the head of the capital company that owns the Ruby Tuesday chain, this is merely an acceleration of a trend that had previously been underway. They were on the decline. They were closing restaurants. So while they've accelerated some of these, the fact of the matter was, in a couple more years, they were going to wind up in the same place. Number two is that while the fact of that acceleration may have been occasioned by the pandemic, there's no reason why, given that this was a long-term trend, that these had to be overnight decisions. That's just bad management. This pandemic has been going on now for 6 months. If you're already on the decline, you have a plan. You know when these things, which locations are scheduled to fade away, and when they are going to fade away. So all you need to do in your little Excel spreadsheet is to change the date. And if you've made the dates dependent on one another, as you probably have if you have any competence at all, then your entire plan will just shift. You'll pull it forward, right? And all the attendant cost savings that you were looking for will shift with it. It's not rocket science. But you know something? What should be just simple as can be, common sense, is that you don't just shock employees. You don't put them in a situation where every day they walk onto the premises not knowing if those doors will open. What do you think happens when employees become broadly aware that this is the norm for this restaurant? Well, I'll tell you what will happen. They're not going to work there. Ruby Tuesday will be the last choice for workers in that industry. And as bad as the restaurant industry is, and it is bad, some of them may decide that it's better to continue to take on unemployment benefits rather than be exposed to a situation where they think so little of you as a contributor to the company that you will literally be the last to know when they shut the restaurant down. It is a disgrace. Now, having these kind of private equity owned brands presents an interesting problem from a cultural perspective. Were Ruby Tuesday still in the hands of the founders of the company? Well, you would say, you've at least got some underpinning for the culture there. Stuff like this probably wouldn't happen, at least not on the scale it is happening. But these guys who took this company over and are just looking to extract maximum dollar from it could care less about the culture. They're not interested in it. Makes no difference. They manage many different brands, each of which argues to have its own culture. And at the end of the day, to them, it is merely some dollar entries in a spreadsheet somewhere. So how do you maintain any sort of culture in an environment such as that? It's extremely difficult. And the less work effectively put into maintaining a distinct culture, which aligns with the purpose of the business, well then, the harder that business is going to be to steer through turbulent times such as this. I've used the analogy a number of times wherein your leadership are the pilots of the aircraft. Your strategy is the flight plan for it. It's where you're looking to go, where you're going to take this aircraft, which represents your company. And the way you steer it, the flight controls systems of the aircraft, is the culture. So in a situation like Ruby Tuesday's in, we have a company where leadership is not producing much in the way of a positive culture. And the business, the company, seems to be heading straight towards the ground. How are you going to pull it out, given you continue to destroy, to cut away at the cables, the fiber optic wire, the cards in the autopilot system, which enable you to control the aircraft? It makes no sense. This thing is going to crash and burn. Now, the ostensible leadership here from NRD Capital doesn't seem much to care that it's going to crash and burn. They only care about where it impacts the Earth. You know, how much more of a flight can they get out of it? Can they eke another hour out? For whatever reason, they deem that to be important. In terms of actually returning this plane to straight and level controlled flight, and then even allowing it to soar and ascend to reach its destination, that doesn't seem to be in their heads at the moment. If your company is showing similar signs, I'd recommend to you the same thing that I'll recommend right now to anyone who is still working at Ruby Tuesday. Check your parachute. Thanks and have a great day.